joining us for this last Zoom meeting before summer break. At least for us, the European Festivals Association, and for the series of conversations that we started a couple of weeks ago between festival makers and cities representatives. And I have to say, there has been so much of knowledge and of practices shared in these meetings from cities starting with Rome, Bergen and Krakow in the first edition, going to Ghent, the network of Eurocities, Clermont-Ferrand, and other cities, Belgrade, the European Tourism Commission, KEA, and so many partners, including the Soul for Europe, here with us as well, that contributed and shared their network and their perspectives in this series of meetings that we had. Some of them were very specific about festival cities and the well-being, as we had last week. Some were more general about the reaction of cities to the crisis, and all of them, I think, had as a conclusion that there is a very strong need of cities and their stakeholders, including festivals and the arts community, to stick their heads together and find new ways of approaching, in a way, a new public life that we see emerging in cities through the arts and cultural actors themselves. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of redefinition of our roles as festivals in this context. And I'm really happy to have this last conversation now before summer with our partner, our friends from Festivals Adelaide, Cristina. It was just such a pleasure to get to know you, Cristina, first of all, and to have the opportunity to work with you in this framework and to introduce our ambitions to you and your ambitions to us, connecting the festival cities network that you are running. And I'm so happy that we have many of these stakeholders now for today's presentation here with us from all over the world, and the ambitions of EFA, the European Festivals Association. And I think that the conclusion of this is that there is no end to this conversation, and there are no conclusions that will tell us that we should stop. I think there are a lot of conclusions that inform us that these conversations are very fruitful and needed and need to go on after summer. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Today's topic is again quite broad. It is about the idea of festivals and festival cities to work and to collaborate with other industries in the city. And I'm very happy to have again Cristina Farinha with us, who's going to moderate and guide us through this session of 1 hour. For today's meeting. I will give you the full floor, Cristina Farinha. She's a cultural and creative policy expert, and she's a member of the committee that is selecting Europe's capital of cultures at the moment here in Europe. Before I give you the floor, I just want to make sure that EFA President Jan Briers will be there until the end of the meeting. If not, I would like to give you the floor now.
I will be there until the end. But I won't take the floor then, because I'm here to listen to all of you, of course. But I wish you already now fine holidays, if you're ready for that, and a fine discussion, because in November we will have our General Assembly of the festivals, and we will take all the information we get for you there, for the hundreds of festivals that listen to us. And that they are in need of your opinions, of your support. And for me, what was great until now was the fact that when we left our meetings, every time everybody was there with a smile on his face. So I consider that as kind of an appreciation for what you learn from each other. So wish you a great meeting now and fantastic holidays.
Thank you very much, Jan. I take over to you, or give over to you, Cristina.
Thank you. Hello to all. Pleasure to meet you all, and many of you again. We are going for our 5th and last conversation and marathon it was between festivals and cities. Thank you to EFA, the European Festival Association, and Kathrin Deventer, but also this time to the Adelaide Festival, to Justina Joachim, for putting up together such a great lineup of speakers coming from the festival world and from all across the globe. So they are our stars today, the stars of the show. So I will introduce them. and then I will remind of the rules of the game, and then I will pass the floor to the staffs. So we will start by the city of Adelaide and the Adelaide Fringe, and we will get the opportunity to hear Heather Croall, the CEO and Artistic Director of the Fringe Adelaide, or Adelaide Fringe. Then we move back, in my case, as I talked to you from Portugal, we move back to Europe, to Edinburgh, Scotland. And we're going to hear Francesca Hegyi, the Executive Director of the Edinburgh International Festival. Then comes Krakow. We will get to hear Mats Schulz, the Artistic Director and co-founder of the Unsound Festival. After our fourth speaker, because we got 5 speakers today, the fourth speaker will be on the other side of the Atlantic in Montreal. It's Nick Farkas. He's the Vice President, is the Vice President booking concerts and events at Evenko. Evenko is an events promoter from Montreal, Canada, that has got a good bunch of festivals in its portfolio. And finally, again, all across the globe, to Singapore. And we will have the opportunity to have Natalie Hennedige, the director of the Singapore International Festival of Art. So I hope I have pronounced all the names, at least in a comprehensive way. And I will pass on the floor to all of you, one by one. You know you have 10 minutes. I will ask you to please keep up with that time. Otherwise, I will have to remind you if you take the floor. You will introduce us your festivals, of course. We are curious about that, but also address the issue and the challenges of the pandemic, notably regarding fundraising, of course. But the pandemic brought also new opportunities, and in what comes to new alliances and relationships, I guess it have opened some new doors. Last week, we had dedicated one conversation to the connections of festivals and cities to mental health. Mental health, but health in general and well-being. But there's a myriad of new connections to tourism, to education, and to any other sector that maybe the pandemic has brought about as new opportunities. So I will leave the floor to you. I will also address the participants now and tell them that after we will have some time for question and answers. So please take the opportunity and you are welcome to address the speakers. Please pose your questions on the So let's start. And first of all, we start with Adelaide and Heather Croall. The floor is yours, please.
Hello, thank you. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you so much for inviting me, and it's great to see everybody, and I want to send my heartfelt love to everybody. I know everyone's having various different levels of difficulty right now, and we send our love from Adelaide. I'm the director at the Adelaide Fringe, and we were very lucky to finish our festival this year. The day after we finished the festival was the day that the country closed down crowds. So March 16th, they closed down, and our final day was March 15th. So we were extremely lucky to do that. Although we did see a very quiet final weekend. The Adelaide Fringe goes for 31 days and nights, and we had a very quiet, we normally sell, every day we sell about 25 or 30,000 tickets, and we went down to about 15 or 10,000 tickets a day on the final weekend, but it was still incredibly lucky. So we are eternally grateful for that. I have some slides, so I think you'll be able, I'm on a telephone because I'm out in the country with no internet, so I can't see all the faces at once. So I think that my slides will come out in a minute. So just to let you have a sense of how big Adelaide Fringe is, in Australia, we are the biggest ticket selling festival. This year we sold 850,000 tickets, And so we sell, every year it's a bit different, but between 35% and 39% of the entire Australian festival arts festival tickets are sold at the Adelaide Fringe. And luckily we were able to also have an addition of a great Fringe this year. So lots of other states that are bigger than us in population, not so much in the festival audience numbers. And Adelaide has a very loyal Fringe and festival audience. And this year we were celebrating 60 years of Adelaide Fringe. So on the next slide, you can see that we are, and this is how we work as a festival. We are open access, coming from the grassroots up. We're a Fringe platform and anybody can register and jump on. So artists and venues, they jump on and that forms the program. And then we sell tickets for everybody. And then that's how they get paid their income. So very similar to Edinburgh Fringe. I know a lot of Fringe festivals are not always open access, but we are totally open access, and we've always been like that for 60 years. In the next slide, you can see what the box office this year was $21 million of tickets were sold at the Adelaide Fringe. But of course, not everybody is some people are earning a lot of money and some people are not earning much money because it's totally 100% defined by their ticket sales. If they sell tickets, they get paid their money. We take a clip on the ticket to cover our operations, but $21 million is what we can inject into the artists and venues pockets at the end of the Fringe. Obviously, some people come and they get great houses and others not so much. The final weekend of this year's Fringe saw us drop down a bit of, we probably would have sold about another $2 million worth of tickets if we didn't have a slow weekend on the COVID weekend. The change came very quickly at the end of Fringe. I mean, it was within days, the whole country really was shut down. And then suddenly we realized all of the artists, we have about 7,000 artists in the Adelaide Fringe. And even though my staff was so tired because we just finished Fringe, we just were so sad because all of our artists had lost all their future festival bookings and they had nowhere to go for another performance. And so on the next slide, you can see two of the immediate initiatives that we tried to do. So we finished Fringe in mid-March and straight away we started to build a digital platform called Fringe View. So Adelaide Fringe View, we wanted to make the most of all the ticket buyers on our system, on our database, and try and help artists earn some money because they lost all their bookings, obviously. So we turned that around very quickly, building that platform in April, linking it to if people wanted to have a live show on Zoom, they could do that, or pre-record video of a show on YouTube, private link, or Vimeo, or different options. But we did that for the month of May, and so we ran that Fringe View for the month of May. You know, there's so much free content out there, but we just wanted to try and see if we could help artists earn some money. And we sold some tickets. We sold quite a good number, but nothing like what we sell 800,000 at Adelaide Fringe. Another opportunity that came up is we worked with a philanthropic foundation to give out grants. Very quick turnaround. We announced they gave us $50,000 and we gave out about $2,000 grants. So we did that very quickly, and we're still talking to the foundation, the James and Diana Ramsay Foundation, again, to look at what else we can do. They have been working with us for a couple of years, helping us buy tickets for disadvantaged communities to go to the Fringe, and also for low socioeconomic schools. And so we did already have a relationship with the foundation to buy tickets for Fringe, and that's been a very successful program for 2 years. So we did have a partnership already, but it was great that they were able to quickly give us the money so that we could give those grants to those artists. On the next slide, you can see the ticket sales in Adelaide Fringe. We've been having 10% growth every year for many years, 2 double-digit percentage growth. And obviously we've been really excited about the idea that maybe by 2022 we might sell 1 million tickets, because that's the best way for the artists to earn more money. The more tickets we can sell. We did a very big digital ticketing system change in 2015, and you can see when we did that digital ticketing system change, it really takes off in the ticket growth. And we just want to sell more tickets because we know that's how artists and venues earn more money. But of course now we have no idea what our ticket sales will be in 2021, and we have to expect, of course, that they probably will go down if the crowd restrictions and so on are like they are. So 20% of the Adelaide Fringe program is international and artists, and 80% is Australian, and actually 50% is South Australian, mainly from Adelaide. So even if we had to only have a local Fringe, we would still have a lot of shows. We have 1,200 shows this year. And if people come in from international next year, they have to quarantine for 2 weeks. So that is possible they could come. So on my next slide, you can see we are surveying a lot of artists right now and venues, and listening, asking what they want us to do for them going forward. A lot of them are asking us to please reduce the fees that we charge. So how can we give them confidence to come back? We have to lower the financial risk for the artists and the venues. So we are in planning, big strategic planning right now, working out how we can unlock money from the government and also from philanthropists to take the fees right down for the artists in 21. And also they've asked us if we can also extend the deadlines. So we're looking at that as well. It's, sponsorship will be very tight next year. So we don't really think that's where we'll be able to absorb the reduction in income, because we need that money to run the Fringe. So we need to find it from somewhere. On the next slide, you can see it's a little, we are a co-creation. We're not a hierarchical event. We're very, everyone around the table, the artists, the venues, the councils, the staff, the ticketing system, everything's a big co-creation, and that's what we are. And especially now we've been using more and more digital systems. We are becoming more and more agile and adaptive, and I think that's what we have to do now with COVID more and more. We just need to be flexible and agile, and we need to be willing to change our mind and change our plans and spin around and just be very flexible. We can't be fixed, and we can't have set planning like we used to. And I think we're as a Fringe, we're already quite agile, so we're used to it. But we're doing a lot of staff training at the moment about being accepting of an agile world, accepting plans changing and things like that, because I think it's a skill set we all need in the staff as well. And my final slide is just a bit about sort of different important elements in the process of co-creation and collaboration, and how when you're not a top-down festival, you are continuously listening to feedback and continuously improving through those co-creation methodologies. And I think more than ever now we're in this COVID world, we need those skills really more than ever.
Thank you, Eda. If you concluded, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, because now we have to move on to Edinburgh and Francesca Hegyi. Please, the floor is yours now, Francesca.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation. And it's lovely to see you all remotely from yes, what is not a cloudy Edinburgh. So it's a bit of a change today. I don't have any slides, so feel free to look away from the screen. I'm just conscious that we all spend so much time looking at screens at the moment. I thought that I'd give us all a break, and you can look off into the distance if you like. So I'm the executive director at the Edinburgh International Festival, and we've been around for quite a few years. We were formed in 1947 after World War II in order to provide something that reunited people after the Second World War. And our vision at that point was to provide a platform for the flowering of the human spirit. And I think that's something that's stands true, and I think is just as relevant today, even more so than it was 73 years ago. So we take place every August, or we have done up until now, for 3 weeks every year in the city, and we invite artists and companies and performers from all around the world. So normally we would be welcoming people from about 40 different countries to perform in the festival each year. We're multi-genre, so we cover music, so that's classical music, contemporary music, traditional music, and also theatre and dance and opera. And this 2020 is the first time in our history that we haven't been able to go ahead. And so I suppose this is, like everybody, it gives us a chance to reflect and think about what's the role of the festival, and when we come back, how do we come back? Just a couple of things that we did when we did cancel. We cancelled in concert with all of our sister festivals in Edinburgh, all of our August festivals. So we cancelled on the 1st of April, which gave us a little time to think about what that means for August and Edinburgh not having a festival. So I think one of the things that I'll talk about in a moment is how this gives us an opportunity to realise what the world is like without culture, and some of the things that perhaps flow from that. So been a really abnormal year for everybody, for all of us, but for those of us working in festivals in particular. And I think what we have now is a greater awareness perhaps of some of the stresses and strains that this period has placed on all of us, on all of our staff, and on all of us who are trying to do our jobs when we don't have a festival to put on, or worried about our friends or our family and how everybody is coping, not just from a health perspective, but just from a general sense of well-being. But I suppose what it does give us is an opportunity, a collective opportunity globally, to be part of a worldwide laboratory of thinking in an experiment of what does the world look like with no culture, because we've not been able to go to the theatre, able to see dance or performance. There's been a lot of digital art, but I think that has some limitations, but none of us have been able to go into rooms with audiences and experience that magic that you feel. And so I think it's underlined how important live art really is for people, and what that does for people in their own sense of health and their own sense of well-being. So I think in the future, what I will be interested in kind of exploring with colleagues in the festival and our sister festivals is how we're able to capture some of that a bit better, and how we're able to systematize our engagement with people to demonstrate that it is good for you, because we all know, and I think we all believe that culture is good for you at some level, but I think we still have a little way to go with some of our health colleagues to make the case that art is good for you. So I think for us, it's probably about working with some of the health authorities that we have in Scotland, as well as the GPs and our local authorities and our social workers and our educationalists to help make the case that participating in arts and culture is a good thing, and actually in the long run can save on things like healthcare bills as well. So I think it's probably good for society as a whole. But I think it's also about working with individuals, because I think over this last period of time we've all become more aware perhaps of our own mental health and the need to take responsibility at an individual level for how we manage that and to it. So I think all of that sort of leads into this notion that is which more popular in recent years, and I hope will continue, of social prescribing, whereby we are able to, as a festival, be on the menu of things that GPs and other healthcare professionals can provide or offer to people alongside medication, so that they are able to enjoy the experience of coming out to live art in the future. And I know there are some schemes in Edinburgh that are up and running, and I think I would love to explore that with our sister festivals over the coming period. You asked us to look at the business model of a festival and how that's been affected by COVID, and I think for us it's been utterly profound. I think when we cancelled at the beginning of April, overnight we lost 45% of our income for the year. So it was absolutely completely critical that we had a good look at how we were going to manage not only the next year, but I think, as Heather said, 2021 is also going to be a year that's really important to plan for as well. So I've kind of looked at this in the short term and in the long term. So I think in the short term, what we're seeing and what we're experiencing is that our boards and our governance and everybody is just going to want to take less risk. So I think we'll be looking at models that are less risky in the future, and that will manifest itself in a number of ways, not least perhaps through programming, where we might be looking at programming more local artists and more local people, which obviously takes away the travel element and the cost associated with that. But it also perhaps will force us to look at things that are bankers that are going to sell well at the box office. So perhaps some of that more experimental, some of that more risky art that we would be programming, not necessarily for our festival, but for other festivals, may not find a place in the programme in 21 or 22, because we're absolutely going to need to make sure that we are able to make our bottom line in the next couple of years. I think, and Heather also mentioned this, I think that we're also going to need to learn to live with uncertainty, because plans are likely to change over the coming few months and years. And I think that we need to adapt and learn how to be flexible and build in different scenarios, accepting that things will change at very short notice. And that might even extend to employing people who are good at dealing with uncertainty and are good at dealing and managing change. And I think it's been interesting to see how people have dealt with the last few months, and some people have dealt with it brilliantly. For some people it's been incredibly challenging. So I think how we build our organisations in future, we're going to need to think about, because we're going to need to be highly adaptable. And then I think we're also going to need to look at our own behaviours. So how we how we treat others during this period. It's been, or it could be tempting just to look at ourselves and make sure that we're okay and that we can balance a budget and that as an organisation we're all right. But we live in a broader ecology of organisations, and I think it's really important that we put out a helping hand wherever we can to make sure that we look after everybody else who's here with us as well. So, and I think people will remember how we all behaved during this period. So in the longer term, I think we'll definitely be looking at reviewing our business models. I think ensuring that we have greater reserves and resilience in our models. We might be looking at ways of reducing permanent overhead, so being a little bit more flexible and fleet of foot around our modelling. And for funders and where the money's going to come from, I suspect for us it will come from the same places, but there might just be a little bit of re-emphasis on different areas. So I think we're already seeing that funders are wanting more information and more relationship to social outcomes and to be tied into our values. So it's less about having brand recognition and more about being tied into being seen to be doing good for the community, and all of that ideally wrapped up into long-term partnerships. And then finally, what we'll be thinking about in the future, I think our strategies haven't changed perhaps, but there's just been more of a re-emphasis on some things. So the two areas I would highlight are environmental sustainability. I think after this period where we haven't all been flying around the world, I think it will be impossible to go back to a time and a model where we are doing that. So I think we will again be emphasising the local. We'll be thinking differently about flying in orchestras around the world for 1 or 2 nights performance. I'm not sure how acceptable that will be in the future. And so a new kind of approach to what I've called responsible internationalism. So how can we be international, but also environmentally responsible? So that's a big challenge for us. And then lastly, the challenge that I think that we're all facing is around diversity. And this has come to the fore of late, obviously, because of some of the Black Lives Matter debates that have been happening. So I think taking a good long hard look at ourselves over the next few months is going to be really important. So that's the people that work in the organisations, how we're governed, people on our stages, people behind the stages, and our audiences, to make sure that we're really reflecting the world in which we live at the moment. So 2020 has been pretty grim so far, but it's given us a chance to reflect and to make changes, and to realise through the absence of all this culture what joy it brings.
Thank you, Francesca. We move on to Krakow. So, Matt Schulz, it is your turn now. Are you there, Matt? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I just had to unmute my speaker. Okay. Yeah, that was very interesting, Francesca. Thanks. Unsound is a festival of adventurous music, visual arts and discourse. It grew out of a DIY context, and although it's run independently through an NGO, we work closely with a variety of institutional and private partners in Poland and worldwide. I should say I also don't have any slides. The heart of Unsound is in Krakow, and it spans concerts to club music, which is probably 60% of the program. It includes a discourse program exploring social, political realities, and we've also produced events in 30 other cities, from New York to Adelaide, in fact, and Vladivostok, and many, many other places in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and other parts of the world. This ties into Unsound also being a platform for building collaborations and projects between countries and artists. We're a member of different networks such as ICAS, which is the International Cities of Advanced Sound, and different EU platforms. We put a spotlight on emerging and new artists from around the world, which we always look for very actively, different music scenes, and we also work with artists to develop and produce new interdisciplinary works, often with a collaborative aspect. So it means that although the main festival is in Krakow and it's very much tied to and integrated into the city, we also connect with people around the world. So there's very much a community around the festival. The Krakow event's multi-venue, and it makes use of adapted spaces. 50% of the audience comes from abroad. The UK is the main place that it comes from. And should also be said that as Poland is a country where LGBTQ plus people are discriminated against, Unsound is very much a space where diverse voices can be heard and where the audience feels safe. In terms of COVID-19, we decided very early on, back in April, that we wouldn't produce the festival in a physical space. And you know, this is problematic, as it is for many other festivals, because live events at Unsound are very much connected to close contact between the participants, so the audience members and the artists. So it means that a successful night, especially like in terms of club music, for example, is a room where you know, have everyone packed in together, and it creates buzz and excitement. And it's quite impossible to produce a late night club program in a way that's safe and also enjoyable. I think at the moment there have been some quite lame attempts to make club nights where people are sitting on chairs and you know, markings on the floor, so they're separated. We definitely didn't want to go down that route. So we had to, like, everyone think outside the box. I think because we're a Polish independent not-for-profit, and I think this is true of other smaller kind of NGO organizations, they're probably used to dealing with various forms of crisis, which possibly gives you the capacity to adapt rapidly and creatively to a situation. So that's immediately what we tried to do. So we're channeling energy into different forms of artistic expression and engagement. So we're creating a book and an album as well. We're commissioning, I think, 22 different writers to create texts, and all of them respond to what this year is in many different ways. So we kind of hope that these works have like a longevity, like as a kind of relic for the year, but they will also connect with what we present online. As I think a lot of others feel, like there's a lot of streamed music events, and I think it's quite difficult to make them engaging online in the streamed form, particularly DJs. I think it's once the club is removed from club music, it's not so interesting. So we're largely focusing on the discourse program, which anyway had become a bigger part of Unsound over the last few years, and exploring the different subjects that are super relevant this year in relation to the pandemic, activism, protests, but we're also bending the experience of what a live event can be online. So we're commissioning artists to create new work, exploring games and performative lectures, rather than, you know, someone performing music in front of a camera in a simple way. And I think that this kind of morphing of online, digital and live experience is like it's a possible or even probable future for festivals, which means really thinking about how different art forms can collapse into each other. And I think this year for Unsound and other festivals and organizations and curators, it's very much a year of experiment, kind of stumbling experiment into kind of working out what that can be. In terms of the business models that we were asked to kind of think about today, you know, putting it bluntly, the public funding and support is essential for Unsound to actually exist and survive, let alone reimagining itself. That's not possible without the support of the city of Krakow, which is even more integral now. And I hope that the reimagining of Unsound and the other essential Krakow festivals really develops alongside the way that the city itself develops in a pandemic and post-pandemic world. It's obviously an incredibly complex task to rebuild the economy and profile of a city that has been tied to mass and cultural tourism, which is very much true of Krakow. But I think Unsound and other festivals and people in the city will be crucial in really working out how to do that. And I think that's probably true of other festival cities. As far as philanthropy goes, there's not much of a tradition of wealthy individuals supporting festivals and events in Poland. It's probably partly to do with there being no real tax incentives. It's hard to see any sponsors supporting festivals like Unsound. It was quite difficult to get that funding before because we're not huge, and I think it will be even more difficult. I think there are some other interesting forms of philanthropy developing for festivals as well as in the club world of clubs, which are obviously also existing quite precariously right now, and artists. And that's this kind of membership or support model, which is crowdfunded. So Patreon is a kind of early example of how that works, I think. And this kind of funding allows events and especially clubs to be more actively, for people to be actively involved in their development and sustainability, and also to take risks. I think it's quite understandable that a festival might not want to take a risk, but for us, this is not really a possibility because we're kind of built on the idea of taking risks. But I do think this question of people relying on headliners and obvious kind of artists in the world of music festivals will also apply in the future, but I hope there's a lot of room for experimentation. Obviously, that can't be the only support for festivals, and this state support is really needed, which is quite, it's not very existing too much in Poland for the cultural sector in this pandemic situation. This is despite the fact that the cultural sector hires 300,000 individuals, so it's similar in size to tourism and hospitality in terms of employment and economic impact. Prior to the pandemic taking place, we were already looking at ways to develop the idea of Unsound, because we do think of it as a platform, not just a festival. So we've been already thinking about film and game production and innovative ways of somehow connecting these ideas with the concept of a festival. And this has caused us to rethink the plans, but also like to develop them in some way. And when I look at like the kind of online streaming of events, and there's so many of them now, so it's quite hard to kind of, for one event to stand out, I think. But I do feel that we're kind of at this really early point. I think often about like Lumiere brothers in terms of film. It's like this, early kind of like stumbling experiments in film that look quite rudimentary and naive at this point. And I do kind of think people will look back at this period in the same way, because I think that this obviously will develop further streaming online. And I think it's like early experiments at the moment. But I think they're essential to festivals, and they will tie into also this idea of local, which will become more important and prominent. So yeah, catering for a local audience, drawing on local artists, thinking about travel by train between countries, which unlike Australia, which is my homeland, is something that can occur easily in Europe. And I think this kind of thinking is long overdue in relation to levels of plane travel that they're not really sustainable in the long term, and it's quite complicated in terms of festivals already, even before this happened. And I think this ties into the fact that there were many things that were not really working or that were unsustainable in the music industry. So within our kind of sector and world, a lot is being reappraised and dissected in terms of what might exist afterwards. And I think it's a very positive thing. There are very vocal conversations about more diversity in terms of programming, supporting marginalized voices and groups. And there's also conversations taking place in live music industry between different parts of that industry, people who weren't necessarily talking to themselves, festivals, promoters, agents, clubs, really trying to understand each other's positions and really consider how to ethically respond to questions that the pandemic throws up, such as what happens if an event is cancelled, which is for a club that might exist precariously, or a festival is a real problem, or an agent, for example. So yes, summing up, I think, yeah, obviously the key consideration at this time is how to produce live events safely and in ways that don't result in financial collapse for independent organizations, in terms of, in the case of like a last minute cancellation, and also trying to think about how to traverse this path between live and online events in this pandemic era, and probably beyond, where live events don't lose their atmosphere and their manifestation online can be engaging. So it requires thinking outside the box, as well as conducting probably lots of unsuccessful experiments. I'm sure some of them will take place at Unsound this year, hopefully, as well as some successful ones. And yeah, this idea of local, where plane travel becomes more difficult or impossible, reconsidering what this means for the audience and for the artists and for the cities where these events take place. But yeah, one last thing is, I think it's also very important that in relation indirectly to the pandemic, you know, the Black Lives Matter protests have shown us that all festivals and organizations should take this moment to dissect, rethink, and rebuild how they've been working in terms of questions of diversity and inclusivity. And it definitely needs to be the part of the process of rethinking how festivals operate.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. Nick Farkas, the floor is yours now from Montreal. Thank you.
Hi. Greetings from very, very, very warm Montreal. At 7 o'clock in the morning, it was 27 degrees. It's going up to 35 today, so I'm out here on my deck sweating. I'm going to give you a quick description of Evenko, which is the company I work for. We are a promoter and based out of Montreal, Quebec, Canada, which is the only French province in Canada, and probably much the only French place in North America. So we have a very distinct cultural cross between English and French. We do a lot of festivals in Montreal. We do 1,500 shows a year between Montreal and Eastern Canada. We are also we have 7 venues. We're a fairly large company. We do a bunch of festivals. We have two basic models, which I'm going to talk about today. We have the festivals that we do in downtown Montreal, which are predominantly free festivals. That's the Montreal International Jazz Festival that would have been its 40th year. The Francophonie, which is a French festival, all French music. Montreal Highlights Festival, which is a winter festival that takes place, which is part culinary, part outdoor activities in February in Montreal. As you can imagine, it's a little bit cold. And then we have another bunch of festivals that we do on an island in the middle of the St. Lawrence River, where Expo 67 took place many, many years ago. And that's our biggest festival is Osheaga, which is a multi-day, multi-genre festival, you know, Coachella type style, North American festival. We have an EDM festival called Il Sonic. We had our first year of our country festival this year called Lasso. We also do a metal festival called Heavy Montreal. We do a punk rock festival called 77, and we do a food festival called You'll Eat as well. So we were tremendously, obviously, impacted by COVID. It really, I mean, it took us from planning and doing all these festivals to doing, you know, just trying to figure out what was going to happen in the rest of the world. I'm going to use my first slide. So can you put the first slide on, Audrey? Okay, this is basically our two sites. So on your right, you have the Montreal International Jazz Festival. So our business models are very different. So the Jazz Festival, which is predominantly free, is in the middle of downtown Montreal. As you can see, it's a spectacular site. We are incredibly fortunate that we have, you know, for our free festivals, we have one of the nicest sites, I think, in, you know, any major city in the world that was laid out to accommodate, you know, large events. And then we have the other site, which is on the left, which is an island, like I said, in the middle of the St. Lawrence River, that's accessible by subway. Both of our sites are accessible, have subway stations right on them. They are both multi-day. The Jazz Festival is 11 days, the Osheaga is 3. But the Jazz Festival, the business model is basically, it's a lot of public funding. So we get, you know, funding from 3 different levels of government: the city, municipal, the provincial government, and federal. And that piece of the puzzle is super important. We also have a lot of sponsorship money, and we have paid ticket shows in all the venues in the area. It's called the Quartier de Spectacle, which means district of concerts. And there are numerous venues, Place des Arts, the big theater, 5 theaters right on the right of that. And we have a 2,000 cap club. So anyways, it's a very big area that's taken over for 11 days by the Jazz Festival. Osheaga is a bit different. It's on the island. It's predominantly a paid ticket event, and then we have a big sponsorship component as well, and then a smaller funding component from the government. It's very, like I said, we are very fortunate that both of these sites, you know, they're city. One's a city park that where Expo 67 started, so it's very, you know, it's got a casino, it's got the Six Flags amusement park, it's a giant park, it's got where the F1 track is. There's 2 islands. And it's a spectacular place to do shows. So we feel super fortunate, and the city has been, you know, we're a festival city, and the city has embraced that whole aspect of everything that we do. And for the Osheaga model, and just a quick, I'll just finish up on the 2 models that we have that be kind of unique. So Osheaga, we also follow it with our EDM festival and our country festival this year. In general, usually we have the metal festival as well, but we all share infrastructure. Osheaga being the biggest, you know, 6 stages. Some of the other ones are 2 or 3 or 4, but you know, what we realized early on is building the city that is the festival site that holds 55,000 people was the most expensive part. So, you know, we wanted to figure out ways to reuse it. So we've tapped into a bunch of different genres of music. Same thing with the Jazz Fest site, where we have the Francophonie, which is the Francos, actually. It's just they've dropped the Folie, but the Francos is a week before, so a lot of shared infrastructure. And then the Montreal Comedy Festival follows that just for laughs. So the sites are used over 3 times, which is very economical, very, you know, environmentally conscious way of setting up our sites. You know, we try to have the least amount of impact possible. For all of our festivals combined in the summer, we generate $91.7 million in economic impact for the city. It's, you know, it's a huge part of our DNA. I mean, we're also in the arena business, but we're in, you know, festivals in the summer is our lifeblood. COVID obviously has crushed us. It's forced us to postpone all of our festivals to 2021. You know, and but it's also, you know, allowed us to, we have 7 venues, so we have a very busy staff trying to evaluate, you know, social distancing options, new configurations, smaller capacities, all kinds of different models. The financing side I've already spoken about, so it's very, you know, we were lucky this year as well because some of our financing stayed in place from all 3 levels of government for the Jazz Fest and Francophonie, which are largely majorly funded by the public financing. And some of our sponsors have maintained their presence as well to support us, which is very encouraging in the current situation. Next slide, I'm going to talk about what we ended up doing for the Jazz Festival this year. So the next slide will give you a bit of a description on that. As we had to pivot to something completely different this year. So what we tried to do was come up with a way to keep the festival brand alive, to keep, you know, the artists working, which was hugely important, and to come up with something that would be compelling in a world of where, since COVID started, I don't know if anybody else is tired of seeing people playing in their living room or in their bathrobes or kitchens, but we wanted to do something a little more representative of what the festival would look like. So we went on a digital, we decided to do this full digital festival, not full because it's normally 11 days, but we did 4 days of programming. And it was hugely interesting because it allowed our teams to really get involved again. You know, it was, I'm sure everybody's been dealing with the same thing where everyone's teams are sitting around trying to be, you know, creative and trying to come up with great ideas. So this actually gave us a chance to put everyone to work. And it was very fortunate the City of Montreal once again stepped up to help us on this, and the Quebec government. And what was interesting is that we had both a bank and Rio Tinto, which is one of the major sponsors for the Jazz Fest, also step up and wanted to be involved in the online programming. And it provided us an opportunity to, it was 4 days. We started at 5 o'clock. It was a lot of content that we filmed with local artists at L'Astral, which is one of our 600 capacity venue. And it was very interesting to see, the reaction to people watching an actual live show again. Obviously, we practiced all social distancing and worked with the city to get the permits necessary to put people into the room and all that. But it worked out incredibly well. And the sponsors, gave us an opportunity, and it allowed us to really realize that there were other hybrid models that we could use going forward with the festivals. I mean, this was a success. It surpassed our dreams in terms of how many people checked out artists. It also exposed people to new artists that they weren't familiar with. And what we realized from the feedback from people is that a lot of the people that were watching weren't people that were coming to the festival anymore, or had come in the past, or had moved on, or who felt like the festival was so huge that they didn't, they liked the idea of sitting in their living room and watching, a well-recorded, visually stimulating, excellent artist perform. So we had a tremendous feedback, and I think that will contribute going forward in further years to bring new people to the festival and bring people back that were previously there. I will move on because I think I'm talking too much. So anyways, that was really an interesting thing. What I've noticed the most about collaborations Canada is not generally, we're not a country that, for the live music industry, there was never a lobbying group until 5 years ago. There's been lobbying groups for the large festival organizations. There's a couple of lobbying groups, Remy and Fame, but the Canadian Live Music Association started 5 years ago. I'm on the board, I'm a vice president, and we have, hundreds of members. It's a fairly recent thing, but what we realized is that there was nobody speaking for live. There was people speaking for recorded, there was all of these different people were lining up to get their agendas across. And we all know that what we represent is a massive amount of culture and a massive amount of revenue for cities all around the world. And so what I've noticed, what's been very compelling and interesting, has been the call to advocacy, like the amount of people joining the CLMA and joining in on the calls every week to get updates from each other, to talk to each other, to figure out best practices, has been really inspiring and has given us all a lot of hope. We had an American programmer for Central Park on one of our calls last week, and she was marveling at how America doesn't even have that. I mean, Europe's obviously way ahead of us in terms of these things, but so I think that's one of the major association things that has been important for us. To conclude, I think the biggest thing we all face is uncertainty. So, at first uncertainty was stifling and devastating. And I think as things slowly started to open up again, we realized, the creativity of our teams, the uncertainty allowed us an opportunity, and that opportunity is to look at things differently. Everyone's spoken about the whole aspect of Black Lives Matter and everything, and social awareness. Those are major things for us going forward, have always been part of what we thought and believed in, but it's much more important to place emphasis on that. But to come up with new models and hybrids of the existing festivals, married with streaming, finding new ways to fund those aspects with partners, with private partners, with corporate partners, new venue concepts. Where our team right now is working on our site holds 55,000 people. Our new team has a venue option that's going to hold 950 COVID unfriendly, we call it, because it will be very safe for people to go to. And it's you can sit on the ground, we have tables, we have tents, it's on a hill. So it's like a mini outdoor theater. And we're hoping to get approval to open that up before the end of the summer. And if you told me a month ago that we'd even be looking at potentially doing things, it's really heartening to see that there is hope at the end of all of this. And I think that we're going to learn a ton from it, and hopefully all those best practices will carry forward.
Thank you, Nika. Thank you. The floor will be yours now to move to Singapore. Natalie, it's your turn now. Also, I tell the audience not to be shy and to post their questions in the chat. We're still having a Q&A afterwards. Please, Natalie, take the floor.
Hi, one and all. Inaugurated in 1977, the Singapore International Festival of the Arts is an annual celebration presenting works in performance, theatre, music, and dance seeking to engage and inspire a diverse audience with strong artistic offerings and experiences. So I currently occupy the position of Festival Director Designate, where I was meant to deliver an edition of the festival in 2021. COVID-19 meant the cancellation of SIFA 2020, and so current Festival Director Gaurav Kripalani completes his 3-year tenure in 2021, and I begin for the first time in 2022. A contemporary arts festival's gaze and engagement rests fixedly on a very complex protagonist, the world. The pandemic rendered the world conspicuously ill. Before, there was a semblance of health. The malady exposed sicknesses that were already there, compounding inequalities, the already marginalized facing disproportionately higher mortality rates, the already economically disadvantaged collapsing back into poverty, and women trapped in lockdowns with their perpetrators under the grip of domestic violence. The world needs healing, and so do the communities and peoples that populate it. A contemporary international arts festival like Singapore's situates itself within the city's environs. The festival can begin by asking, what is our city's relationship to health and well-being? Singaporeans prioritize salary and job security in an expensive city. Taking care of the family unit comes first. Singapore has an aging population. Singapore is one of the world's most overworked cities, spending about $2.3 billion on stress-related illnesses annually. Mental health should be made a national priority. While social distancing is the watchword of the day, isolation has always been here. There is a natural synergy between the arts sector and the health and well-being sector. Health and well-being's resilience and arts catharsis or release are powerful twin entities. With COVID-19, many on the medical front lines in Singapore instinctively went into crisis mode, having faced SARS in 2003 and H1N1 in 2009. They saw this coming. A festival can bring the arts sector into communion with various other sectors, including the health and well-being sector. What does the combined potentials of the art and health and well-being sectors mean to different segments of society and to various communities? These two sectors can relate to nuanced issues reaching into the concerns and advocacies of diverse demographics. Women's empowerment is a health and well-being issue. Racial justice and intersectionality is a health and well-being issue. Mobility barriers for people with disabilities is a health and well-being issue. Supportive school environments, sexual violence, emotional growth are health and well-being issues. Festivals awake to the moment in which they exist can identify pertinent social and health challenges and then create generous, expansive frames for which artists can build the bridges of connection and communication. Artists will act in their way, applying the strategies and vocabularies of art. They will listen, communicate, challenge, provoke, reach, and bridge. The speak of art, so to speak, is expansive, never reductive. Artists speak from who they are and where they're from and from their way of life, speaking from places of personal truth and articulation to see themselves and beyond themselves, speaking loudly or in complete silence, engaging in complex conversations, speaking to dispel fear and to open the heart and mind. Festivals provide listening spaces to deeply listen and be shifted by another or another's perspective. To be shifted by another or another's perspective is one of the most important things a festival can do. Just as the health sector reaches out and works with all the various sectors, festivals too can reach out, connect, bridge, and inspire creation and collaborative partnership and in the celebration of ideas. In essence, what an international arts festival cultivates is multiplicity, or a platform for the sharing of unique perspectives, delivering cultural pluralism and a multiplicity of experience. Festivals become vital when they are viewed as socially and globally engaged entities that serve as channels of connection and communication between people and communities, exchanging ideas, facilitating critical dialogue in stride with the concerns of momentous social movement, the Occupy movement, climate strikes, Me Too, BLM. Festivals can inspire deep reflection, inspiring us to look inwards and outwards simultaneously. We enter the world with a cry. Our small forms take on the shape of anguish. We are in conflict with ourselves on day one. This is the condition of being human. In time, we learn how to decipher injustice, exclusion, oppression, discrimination, and fear. And we give more complex shape, dimension, and justification to that cry. And then the struggle with the outsider becomes real, and we become in conflict with every other. So festivals championing diversity on every level allows us to be in the space with others. Festivals can serve to reflect a microcosm of a more open, less contentious world, one where there can be hope for a better tomorrow. The world is troubled. It has always been. It is wounded, and its wounds make it volatile. As children of the world, we inherited its troubles, its wounds. We are often in darkness, often despairing. It's just what it is. The arts in all its range of expressiveness reminds us that we are vessels of stories. We are blood, water, and stories. Embodying stories is what makes us human. The articulation and communication of stories is at the essence of art. Sharing and listening to each other's stories is one step closer to paradise because it takes us one step outside of our own hells. Wounds forged in a world encompassing the historically marginalized, racial and ethnic inequity, and the historical trails of blood. Festivals are not just an escape from the daily. They don't just provide for an exuberant atmosphere, a joyful gathering. All those things are great and to be desired, but there is more. So we must stand before potential backers and advocate for what festivals can mean, what they can bring, and their indisputable relevance in the midst of contemporary life and its complexities. Rather than echoing the hypermarket, chasing and offering what's glossy and exclusive and exclusively on circuit, we can frame, curate, and collaborate with tenderness and sensitivity. A contemporary arts festival such as the Singapore International Festival of the Arts can be a compelling voice, responding to the ever-evolving state of the day, considering all the unpredictable shapes and hues the day may adopt. COVID-19 placed extraordinary conditions on our interactions with each other, work and life as we knew it. But there will be light and new possibility as we step into a dawn, soberer perhaps, with the knowledge of what we have gone through. Existing vitally in the world involves being acutely aware of ever-shifting perspectives, where held views and beliefs are tested and challenged. Positions on multiple complex scales between extreme points and gray areas. All the time, new sensitivities emerge that reflect changing times and a spectrum of perspective. So our festival can open and lend itself to the varied dialogues and questions of our time, and also take a visible stand in our commitment to diversity, freedom, the expression of marginalized voices, platforming unique, excellent, important voices, rocking the performance world with their bold perspectives, investigations, and generosity. Art will engage with the happenings of the day, but it must do so in the language of art, the speak of art, a vocabulary that makes art, art, unmistakably. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a panoply of voices and time zones, huh? That really reflected the richness of festivals and the importance of festivals' roles today. But time flies. Most of you took a little bit more time, but it was fantastic and fascinating to listen to you all. So I really thank you. I see no question at the moment. Is there any now? I see here. Otherwise, please, if there is any urgent question, please speak now. I see here something, but no. Okay. So I guess I will have to round up and pass on to Simon Mundy for the conclusions. I thank all the speakers and also the participants and attendees from all over. It was fantastic to have these conversations, and I guess the pandemic showed many obstacles and closed us all in, but it also really opened quite a few doors. So there's also a word of hope here. And I won't say anything else. I'll pass on to Simon Mundy for the conclusions, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, everybody. And of course, as ever, this final summing up is an exercise in reductio ad absurdum. So you'll forgive me if 90% of your speeches are left out. Starting with Heather, I think one of the most interesting things that came out of her talk was about what artists expect from festivals. They need lower fees, they need for the charges, they need to mitigate finance risk, they need extended planning and timetables and flexibility, and most of all, the acceptance that plans are going to change. Festivals themselves need to accept that plans are going to change as they go along. Francesca Hegyi from Edinburgh International Festival talked about the opportunity to be part of a worldwide experiment of what it is like to be in the world without live arts and how that does affect well-being. How do we capture that mood and work with health authorities and social workers and education? And also to work with individuals and doctors prescribing the arts as a way out of social problems. The dangers of the next few years are less risky programming, local and needing to sell well, and that the festivals are going to have to learn to live with uncertainty. We can, however, help with the organizational ecology of the arts, and people remember how we treated them during this crisis. She talked about a fine idea of responsible internationalism, about how to work within the current and future parameters of environmental and social well-being. Matt from the Unsound Festival in Krakow talked about the need to support emerging artists and discipline, and in a time when some societies were becoming much more conservative, to provide a safe space for audiences of diversity. He talked also about that it's crucial to replace traditional tourism with something that's far more responsible and based in the artistic relationships in the city. More forms of financing were necessary, in particular in crowd-funded memberships, and suggested, quite interestingly, the idea of game production as a way that festivals might start thinking about how to digitalize their content. We heard from Montreal that with his 7 venues and all the different festivals of jazz, French music, outdoors, the island that I always see just as a Formula One venue, but actually is a huge expo site in Montreal, that you could work with reusing these festival sites at least 3 times each, so that the infrastructure was much more sustainable over a season than just for one festival at a time. And that those watching were very often people watching digitally were very often people who didn't come to live events anymore. They'd moved on to either a different sort of venues or had dropped out of venue going altogether. And now we have a pause while I find the right page. Trouble with notebooks is they go backwards and forwards. Here we go. And then from Singapore, the the fascinating idea that the world has always been troubled. I mean, I think we know this, but it's good to be reminded of the fact that the world has always been troubled, and that just at the moment the world needs healing, that that combating isolation that was there anyway is something that we should be at the center of. That diversity is a matter of health and well-being, and that festivals can connect with all issues and all sectors. That what we need is a platform for pluralism. And just to come out, the two last things that she said, that we are all about storytelling, and that is one step towards paradise.
Thank you, Simon, as always, for this fantastic summing up of so much content that was shared today again in this conversation. Thank you, Cristina, for sharing and helping us to understand the timing, the Zoom functions, and everything that we are dealing with in this context in the last 5 conversations. Thank you, everybody from all over the world today. Thank you in particular to Cristina to contribute to this last session before summer. As I said before, we had 5 conversations, we had 5 cities networks that contributed, we had 17 different examples, speakers from cities and festivals all over the world. We had some 250 participants, festival makers, and city representatives that joined us in the last couple of weeks and months. We had a fixed date, a Friday lunchtime at 1 o'clock here in Brussels, and different times in your countries, where we had the chance to meet. In EFA, we had 20 Zoom meetings, I think, in the last couple of months, every Wednesday in the morning, to connect within the festivals community, with sponsors, with different stakeholders that I think need to be together and have a conversation together. And that is for me the main conclusion of course, a big task that we have now in EFA here and with all our partners, to digest everything that you said, to distillate something political and something provocative, or something proposing to authorities, to the European Commission, to national ministries, to different stakeholders that I think need to listen to what we as festival makers have to propose. And that I think this process gave us so much of that information and material that I think we can use for continued conversation on the one hand, but for very important political work, for arts and culture in different budgets on the other hand, and the recognition of arts and culture on the budget level and in policies at the same time. EFA is 70 years old. It's a very old lady of a network. We started with 15 festivals, including the Edinburgh International Festival, and I think it's such an important message for us, for the association, and for all our partners, that this association of once 15 festivals has become an important platform for dialogue and for stakeholders' involvement around festivals in EFA, in its Festival Academy, and our initiatives. I'm very, very thankful that you take this invitation and the platform for these conversations, and I hope that's the last word. Before Jan, I give the floor to you again. No, to say goodbye to everyone before I wish you all a good summer and a good holiday, a good winter in Australia, anywhere you are. Enjoy the season. Thank you, everybody, and please be attentive to new invitations that we are sending out after summer. We would be very, very happy to have you back on board in these conversations. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kathrin.